Hi friends, this is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight, and today I'm going to give you a rapid fire overview of this San Onofre nuclear waste problem. This talk usually has taken about an hour. We're going to try to get it down as much as possible. So first of all, this is the San Onofre site. I just want you to see it. The domes that you see here are where the reactors. This is all closed now. The one in front of you, the closest one, is number 3. The next one is 2, and then this one in the distance isn't there anymore, and it is the Unit 1 reactor. And then if you look carefully here, you'll see some diagonal buildings. We're going to be looking at those later. This is where some of the spent fuel dry storage is located. These buildings here, these square buildings in the back, is where the fuel pools are located, which is where more of the spent fuel is located. This is in San Diego County at the very top. These beaches here are some of the most pristine and sought after surfing areas in the world. Next to it here is a 10-lane freeway of I-5, and next to that is a very active rail line, including passenger and freight lines. Now, I'm not going to cover this very much, but I am a trained engineer. I did run for office a couple times. I was arrested for registering voters one time in 2011. We're still concentrating on nonpartisan issues primarily that have a technical side, such as election integrity and the nuclear waste problem. I'm not going to cover the emergency shutdown of this plant, which happened on January 31st, 2012. Exactly how that happened in these steam generators, which they tried to replace, and then based on getting around the approval of the NRC. I'm not going to cover the 3 different projects which occur, except that we're going to look at this last one, the nuclear waste. I'm not going to cover the disputed shutdown costs and the secret meeting between Michael Peavy and Stephen Pickett in the Hotel Bristol, Warsaw. Or the reason that this was all revealed after the San Bruno gas fire, which killed 8 people and ruined 24 homes. That ended up causing the secret notes to be revealed after the FBI search of Peavy's home. So we're going to just get past all of that. We're going to concentrate only on the nuclear waste. Realize the nuclear waste from these power plants is extremely dangerous. It's deadly for more than 25 years at a very minimum, but some have half-lives of more than 9 million years. Plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years, and you have to go by about 5 to 10 half-lives, depending on who you talk to before it becomes reasonably safe. And you'll notice here, all of this chart here is all the different isotopes and how fast they decay. Now, they're going to have different quantities of each one of these, but the total here that you see, it takes this 10 to the 6th. This is 1,000 years, 10,000, 100,000. This is 1,000,000 years. And you can see it's still not all gone. There is a total of 3,855 fuel assemblies. About 2/3 are in the pools, and about 1/3 or 50 are in the dry canisters. Now, you will need to know what these fuel assemblies look like. This is a typical fuel assembly. They're about 13 feet long and 9 inches on a side. They are, as you can see, they weigh about as much as 2 of them weigh as much as a typical car. So they're very, very heavy because this uranium in here is some of the heaviest elements on Earth. You can't get near these. So once this spent fuel is spent, even if it's cooled for 10 years, if you get within a meter of one of these fuel assemblies for 3 minutes, it will kill you. So this stuff is very, very toxic. You don't even have to touch it, and it will kill you. So the only way to keep these is within these fuel pools. Not the only way, but this is the way they tend to plan to keep this. All of these nuclear plants have fuel pools, something like this. The ones at San Onofre are like a big swimming pool in the ground. They're 40 feet deep, so you can see this first part that's open. That is going to be deep enough like maybe 20 feet here, so that you can pull up a fuel assembly and still keep it in the water, and then immerse it inside these little cavities that they have here. Now, when they first put these in, they were planning to have a place to put the fuel, and we're supposed to have a depository set up in 1997. It wasn't set up. It's still 20 years later now and still not available. So these fuel pools have become more and more heavily densely packed. They decided on a way, they've come up with ways to increase the packing of sometimes 4 and 8 times what they originally planned for. So Yucca Mountain was required in 1997. It wasn't opened. We'll go over it in a second. The trend is just to leave the waste at each one of the plants in a 100+ year time frame. And all of these different agencies are finger pointing. The Department of Energy has responsibility for the waste, but and the NRC has responsibility for safety. So nobody really takes responsibility for everything. So the waste is hard to store in these fuel pools, and so they come up with this idea of having dry cask storage. This was originally planned so that they could just store it on site on a temporary basis, but it's become more and more permanent because nothing has opened up. There's 2 basic methods, which is a horizontal system that you see on the left here and a vertical system, which is what's planned. You can see in this picture, they've already put in the 75 vertical canisters system, which is called Holtec, only about 100 feet from the water, and this is what really concerns us. Of course, we're still concerned about these horizontal system back here, which is a little bit further from the ocean, but since it is up above the ground, it isn't in, so far in danger of getting inundated. Again, this was Unit 3. That's where the emergency took place. Unit 2, and you'll notice Unit 1 was right in this location. So they're putting the spent fuel stuff right where Unit 1 used to be. So they have to keep these, even when they're putting them in the horizontal and vertical system, they have to have a shield around it so that any of the workers are not exposed to the radiation that's coming out of these canisters. But these are relatively thin stainless steel canisters, 5/8 of an inch thick. The reason thin is kind of nice in many ways is it's more ductile and can bend instead of crack and break, and it's better at getting the heat out. So they can get, they can put hotter fuel in there and have it work properly. The vertical ones you see, they carry them over vertically, and then again with this protection around it, lower it into these cavities. This is what the new ones are being put in. The problem that we've come up with here is that they have to pull this thing out by these bolts on the lid that's welded to the top, and it's never really been tried, especially after a long period of time of storage. This vertical system is called UMAX. It allows the hot canisters to cool and is better, they say, at resisting terrorist attack. It requires that the cool air come in and circulate around, and all of them have to have this sort of air circulation. The canisters themselves are called the MPC-37 because they have 37 spots for those fuel assemblies. These are 6 feet in diameter, 18 feet long, and weigh 105 tons. That's about 210,000 pounds. That's about the same as 20 typical cars. Again, way, way heavier than regular material because this is uranium. Now let's talk about Yucca Mountain. You're going to hear about this a lot as a solution. Yucca Mountain is about 90 miles north of Las Vegas. It's in an area that used to be used for experimentation on nuclear weapons. So there's a lot of radioactive area in that vicinity. If you look at Yucca Mountain and Google it, and then go up northeast a little bit, you'll see this pockmarked landscape, which is where all of the nuclear underground tests were performed. And there's still these big, craters there. So this is the reason it was chosen, is that not so much that it's a great mountain to put it in, but because this area has already been ruined and never can be used for humans. As much as people might complain, not in my backyard, let's face it, this area is not going to ever be used for anything. The reality, though, is that it's not really that deep. You see in this cutaway here, there's really one big tunnel that they put through, which is about 3 miles long. They are planning to put in these blue tunnels, which would then store the materials you see here in canisters. But if you count this up, you'll notice that there is not 37. These are much smaller canisters. And also, this Yucca Mountain, the criteria is that the whole place has to be less than the boiling point, 100 degrees centigrade. So these canisters can sometimes be 400 degrees Fahrenheit on the outside. The spec is up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit on the inside, and Holtec has even argued to let them go up to 1,050 degrees in their storage facility. So the idea that these can be moved to Yucca Mountain and stored there in any reasonable period of time, like we're talking about, is insane. They cannot go in because they're way too hot. They have to be stored on the surface with air cooling for the next 40, 50, maybe 100 years. There's a cat over here. That's what you're hearing. Excuse me for that. So, cat, don't interrupt me. So the thing is, Yucca Mountain cannot take these really, really hot canisters. So it is not a solution. Even if it was open today, this could not be used. Instead, the Department of Energy, in their glorious wisdom, have come up with the idea that it's best just to leave it wherever it is. And so now they've come up with a new waste confidence study that says that this generic environmental impact statement allows indefinite storage on any nuclear site. You can see the bottom one here, indefinite storage. The problem with this is that not all sites are the same. Some are much more dangerous than others. Some sites may be just fine to store the fuel there for a very, very long time. But in our case, it isn't the case. Now, if you look at this map and just disregard these colors, but you can see the very many sites throughout the nation which become terrorist targets. A conventional weapon put in these areas would turn into a dirty bomb. This is a side view of where they want to put it, and you can see the high water mark here, where the salt water is only inches below the canisters where they are. And I've heard from people that work on the site that actually the water level is higher than that, and they had to actively pump it down in holes that they had to dig around this. So this is why another reason that we're concerned. Of course, if you look at the actual spec for the UMAC system, there's supposed to be 100 feet of material under it, not water just inches under it. This is a side view of the cans that they put in before they lower the canisters in. You can see these two workers in the background here that are about a third of the height of these things. Very, very big. Why not put it there? Well, guess what? We're right on the ring of fire where 90% of the world's earthquakes occur and 81% of the largest earthquakes occur. This is not where you put nuclear waste. All of California is in a highest hazard or very high hazard area. This area should never have any nuclear plants or nuclear waste in it. This is insanity. We're also next to a big fault line here called the Newport-Inglewood Rose Canyon Fault Zone, which predicts a 7.4 magnitude of very, very large and destructive earthquake right offshore. Songs is right here. We also know that the salty ocean air encourages cracking. Once the surface of these canisters gets below 85 degrees C, that's about 160 or so degrees Fahrenheit, then they will start to crack. And we know exactly what the growth rate is once it starts. The sea level rise is predicted. Some people say there is no sea level rise and no global warming or anything, but actually the fact is that it has been rising, and the projections are it's going to rise even faster. The Coastal Commission predicts the ocean will surround the Isthmus by 2092 and 2117. You see, in 2192, it will be way around it. It's not going to take that long. If you put it back, 2192, 82, 72, 62, 52, we're looking at only a few decades from now, this thing will be surrounded by water, according to the Coastal Commission's their own predictions. What are the problems with this site? It's got a terrorist risk factor. It's near large populations, 8.4 million people within 50 miles. Very easy to get to by terrorists. You could launch a little weapon from in Mexico or just off the freeway and hit this thing and cause a nuclear disaster. All of Southern California would have to be evacuated. It would ruin these beaches and all the real estate would just become worthless. It's in an earthquake zone where there's an earthquake fault only a few kilometers offshore. It's in a tsunami zone. This is places close as the water as you could possibly get. You could just move it a few miles offshore and eliminate that risk. Again, I said 8.4 million residents. Now, there's also not just risks from the ocean, there's risks to the ocean. This is a very delicate ecosystem in the ocean, and if we make it radioactive, we're going to ruin it. It's next to the freeway and railroad, which goes right through the exclusion zone, which never should have happened. People can't even believe that they allow this freeway and railroad to go through the exclusion zone where no other nuclear plant allows people to go. There is nothing good about this site. Well, what to do about the waste? So, in summary, before I get to this, Citizens Oversight did sue the Coastal Commission over the permit that they granted to put this installation in there. They have proceeded to put it in. We have been unable to stop it because no one wants to take the risk to do anything else and then shoulder the liability if something should happen. But we do want it moved off the coast as quickly as possible. We have brought up other alternatives, such as the Palo Verde plant in Arizona. I'll show you in a second. And there's places in the Mojave Desert, Camp Pendleton, and the Consolidated Interim Storage. So basically what people say is that maybe the best place to put this waste is at the Southern California Edison headquarters. And you can see in the parking lot, we've decided to put this here. Yes, this is just a joke, but I can see that, they say it's perfectly safe to put nuclear waste 30 yards from the ocean. Maybe a better place is that Southern California Edison headquarters so that they can appreciate their good work for the next 25,000, should say 250,000 years, but they probably won't be around that long. So the first place that comes to mind is the Palo Verde nuclear plant. It's already a nuclear plant. It's off the moving Pacific plate. It's out of earthquake risk. It's over near Phoenix. You can see a sky view of this here with the 3 nuclear plants, and this is where their ISFC is today. There's a close-up view of it. You can see the containers, which actually are above ground in this case. Here's where it is. There's the Salton Sea, San Diego. The train comes by there pretty close. And then in this area is where Phoenix is. This is not next to any big water resource, unlike almost all other plants. It's not in the earthquake zone. There's no danger to the ocean. It has minimum corrosion risk. It's already a nuclear site, which is partially owned by Southern California Edison, and really only paperwork is required. We have to convince them to do it, and then to add it to their inventory that they have in this safe location versus right on the water. Transportation is feasible. This is the recently approved Holtec High-Star 190 transportation cask, which is 9 inches thick, filled with lead on the sides to stop the radiation exposure as much as possible, and has these impact limiters on the end. So if something should happen, it falls off of this, then it will not break open. This is going to be a very careful transportation problem. They can transport up to 5 of these on one small train at a time in a very careful manner along the train right-of-way. Trains, heavy rail is rated as the safest. You can see here is one of the safest. Of course, that's based on fatalities, and there aren't many people in it, but it's still better than if you tried to do it on a road, which these are really too big to put on the road anyway. We have what's called consolidated interim storage being proposed in either Western Texas or Eastern New Mexico. And you can see the location here. It's that red dot right next to the WIP plant. This has not been licensed yet, but it's another one of the key things that we want Southern California Edison to look into for moving it there. So let me cover the status. Before I do that, let me just mention the other things. We also want them to look at the Camp Pendleton option, which is just a few miles inland and would not have to involve any serious transportation risks because you could keep the fuel off major roads. It's also inside a military base and could be secured very easily. It is still next to earthquake risks, high population densities, and so it isn't the best solution possible, but it is better than where it is. We want them to look at that. And also we want them to look at some place along the railroad line between San Onofre and Yucca Mountain. People say Yucca Mountain is in the future. We kind of have our doubts that it's going to open anytime soon, but it may be still appropriate to put the consolidated nuclear waste at that location while it cools on these somewhat above ground retrievable storage installations. And so there may be some place along this railroad line between San Onofre and Yucca Mountain. We suggest maybe in California, before you get to the Nevada border, there's some really desolate areas there that might be appropriate. So, or all the way to Yucca Mountain and not quite inside yet. There's no railroad line that goes all the way there, but it should still be reviewed. So we sued them. They had the hearing scheduled for April 14th. This is somewhat dated now, but we're in a negotiating process at this time. We anticipate that negotiations will come to a close soon. The next official hearing date at this time is September 8th. But our goal is to basically, in a nutshell, move this fuel from this location as quickly as possible to a more suitable location. The SSC only 100 feet from the ocean is unreasonable and imprudent under any conditions. But it's going to be difficult for anyone to stop them from putting those canisters in there for at least for a short time, because if anything should happen, then somebody has to shoulder the blame, the liability, and it's not going to be me. We could not take out an injunction or something like that without something like a $200 million bond, and we didn't have that kind of money. Maybe you do. You can help us support this in the future. Now, we believe that San Onofre and all California is a special circumstance due to seismic and ocean risk. This is not a NIMBY issue. This is not an in my backyard issue. This has to do with just a general purpose risk issue. And there should not be nuclear plants in California, and there should not be nuclear waste in California due to the seismic risk. Now, we need your help to continue to apply public pressure on Southern California Edison to do the right thing. I just want to mention nuclear power is, I believe, the worst human blunder. It's expensive. It costs 2 times more than market rates. Even during 2012, when the nuclear plant was shut down and you would think prices would be really high. The waste will cost even more. No one is really factoring in the cost of dealing with waste for 5,000 generations. That's 40 times all recorded history. This is ridiculous to even try to put this on the shoulders of future generations. Any technology that generates waste faster than you can recycle it is irresponsible. We have to become responsible and sustainable. Also, large accidents happen regularly. It's, I believe, a bigger problem than climate change to continue to use these plants. We need to move to renewable power as quickly as possible. It doesn't have these problems. And do not use nuclear power as a solution for climate change. Please sign up on our website at, you can sign up at citizensoversight.org/signup. Sorry, there's no sheet here because this was made for a in-person meeting. Go to No Nuke Dump on the Beach on Facebook, a group. We need your help. Put your eyes open. This is one of the most psychologically active images, eyes open. watch what's going on, go to public meetings. That's what Citizens Oversight is all about. Again, my name is Ray Lutz with Citizens Oversight. Visit our site at citizensoversight.org. Please donate, citizensoversight.org/donate. Thank you.